We are live. I have mighty Peter Murrieta, with me today. Why Latinx storytelling matters. I'm so excited to have you here, Peter.
I'm so excited to be here. This has been, I wouldn't even say a long time coming, but it's been swiftly arriving.
I love that. Swiftly arriving, yes. Let's start in the very, very beginning, the prehistory.
Okay.
Why, your story.
Sure. My great five greats grandfather was named Joaquin Murrieta. You see some of these posters here. You see that head in the jar. He was a gold miner from Sonora, and he moved north to California during the gold rush, and he suffered greatly, as a lot of Mexicanos and Californios did. Claim was taken away from him. His cousin was killed. His wife was raped and killed. And he had a very interesting reaction to it all, and he took up arms. He was not a gunman, not a bandito, but he took up arms, and he gathered in a small band and later an army and marauded through gold country. And he, some say he was a freedom fighter, others that he was a vengeance seeker, but he became a legend, a very, very important legend to Mexican Americans, and especially California Mexican Americans.
Right. And in fact, you and I have talked about this, but the inspiration for things like Zorro, and then of course Zorro was the inspiration for Batman. So the legacy, my God.
Yeah. I mean, he is that guy. I remember when I was a little kid seeing some of the Clint Eastwood Westerns where he was like a wrongfully accused person who sought vengeance. I remember my dad and my mama Nina saying, that's the Joaquin story. And even just last night, completely not on purpose, I was watching Blood In, Blood Out, which I hadn't seen in years. And this guy, they're having a party after the güero gets his Pachuco tattoo, and they lift up their shot glasses and they're like, "To Joaquin Murrieta." And I was like, oh my God, I forgot. So, it's a name that means a lot. It means a lot to my family. My dad is named Joaquin Murrieta. My son is named Joaquin Murrieta. And it's a story that's very powerful and has a lot of resonance.
Mm-hmm. Now, if we're going to sort of follow your parentage, let's talk really briefly, if you don't mind, about your parents and how they kind of came together and,
sure,
that whole ancestry.
Well, my mom is Irish and Irish American. She's from Long Island. She moved to Tucson because her father, my grandfather, was a fireman. He developed asthma on the job, and way back in the 40s, the cure for that was to move to Colorado or Arizona, move to a dry climate. And the story is he was in Mass and stood up and asked if anyone was going to Colorado or Arizona, and somebody said that their kid was going to college in Arizona, and he got a ride. And that was it. So she got there. My dad is an immigrant. It's funny, the original Joaquin moved to the United States, and then so did my dad. There's a joke in our family that we just continue immigrating to this country no matter what. And he came here in the 50s. They met in high school. It's a very Riverdale, Archie and Betty story, really. I mean, they met in high school. My dad speaks English as a second language. She asked him, I think, to what's it called? Sadie Hawkins? Is that Sadie Hawkins? Where the girls asked the boys to dance, because in the 50s, of course, only the men asked women out. What a time that was. And I guess she did it as a joke, a sarcastic joke. Him, not knowing English to the depth that she did, didn't pick up on the joke, got her phone number, and called the house to ask what time to pick her up. And I guess she felt bad, and so she went with him. And that was that.
And so then they had a family there in Tucson, is that right?
Yeah. So that's where I grew up. I was born there. My sister was born in California. She's younger than me. And I grew up with my dad and my mom there. We moved around a little bit, but I ended up doing high school in Tucson. And I really consider that, because it was where I was born and where I did a lot of growing up, to be my home.
Beautiful. Yeah. Well, you went to college there, not surprising. And tell us about that path and why, why you chose the things that you did and how
Sure.
kind of.
Well, we didn't have a lot of money. And so we didn't have a lot of options like you do now. And so I went to a local college, and that was the U of A. It was a couple of miles down the road from my home. And I went there with the intention of studying creative writing. And the hope was going to be that I would turn into a high school English teacher and a baseball coach was the big goal. Just coaching high school ball and teaching some, Mark Twain and Charles Dickens, and that would be it. And while I was there, I got a paperback from Donna Swaim, Professor Swaim, in my humanities class on existentialism. And she had written on the paper, "See me in my office." And it was kind of the chill that goes through a young student's heart where you hear that, no grade. And I went to her office and she said, "This is the funniest thing I've ever read." And I did not know that. And I said, "So what's my grade?" I was just pressing for that grade. I wasn't such a great student. And then she said, "Forget about that. I mean, what do you want to do? What do you want to become?" And so we had this talk that I don't think anybody had ever really had with me before. And so out of that, I joined this comedy group on campus, Comedy Corner. I think they're still going. They do an hour live show every week from campus, and they improvise and do written sketches, and I wrote. And then out of that, I eventually realized I wanted to do something like that for a living. And Second City from Chicago came out and toured and did a show. And when I saw that, something hit me, and I thought, that's where I need to go. And so I started making plans almost immediately on leaving, even though I didn't have my degree in hand and I didn't know what Chicago looked like. I mean, maybe I'd seen like Hill Street Blues, maybe. So I think that's Chicago, but that's about it.
And then there was a period there, right? Before you, the next kind of big question is how, like TV, how did that happen?
Right. So I go to Chicago because I want to do sketch comedy. I want to be a comedy writer. And I learned in college with that group, and I had written some plays. And so I went there and I auditioned and I got in. And I was in the National Touring Company, and I was acting on stage in front of an audience. And my mom and dad had seen me do some shows in Tucson that nobody would come to. And they were in Indiana for some thing to do with my dad's job. And I was coincidentally doing a touring company show at Notre Dame. And so they tell a great story about, they decided they would come out a day early or stay a day late, and they come see me. And my mom says they were driving to the venue and they got nervous. They're like, what if nobody's there again? What if this is one of those shows Peter's doing where nobody's there? And as they pulled around into the parking lot, they saw a local Indiana TV truck with a satellite up, and they saw a crowd waiting to go in because Second City is pretty famous. And I think my mom and dad at that point thought, oh, wow, this could work out for him. I don't think they had a lot of hope until that moment. And when you're at Second City, you're in this theater that is so steeped in Saturday Night Live and situation comedies on television. Everything from Ed Asner and Mary Tyler Moore, he's from Second City, to like I said, Saturday Night Live. And you just kind of start to dream about that stuff, and you think it could maybe be you. And so out of that, I just decided to give it a go. Like, I was going to try to be a TV writer. I really wanted to do that.
Really remarkable, Peter. And so, how did you get from the moment I want to do this to Greetings from Tucson in 2002?
Well, I got that, you know, I got that bug, and I had a couple of great supporters. David Miner was a college intern who was at Second City, and he and I became friends. And he had announced that he was going to become an agent, and he had said that he was going to represent me. Now, mind you, he was a college intern who was just doing things like answering phones, and I was somebody who was in a van touring around the Midwest doing shows for 200 or 300 people. But he was like, "I'm going to represent you," and I thought, that's great, but I don't know what it means. And with his guidance, I got out to LA and I got started. At first, I was doing set construction and doing jobs in show business based on my own set of skills that I had from growing up. But I was writing scripts. I had already kind of learned that process and was getting ready for an opportunity. And I got an opportunity in 1995 or 6 with ABC. There was a writing fellowship for diverse writers. And I had a student who was taking an improv class from me. And she worked at Disney, and she said, there's this fellowship, and if you have a script, I can get it in. The deadline happened yesterday, but if you have a script ready, I can take you. And I had a script ready. Like, if I had said, oh, give me a week to write one, it would have been no good. But I had a script ready. I had a Seinfeld sample, and I got it to her. And I think a couple weeks later, I got a call to come interview. And I was in the waiting room at ABC to go interview to be in a writing fellowship. And it was incredible. I was across the way from this guy who had cut-off shorts and flip-flops on in the big executive building. And he introduced himself to me as the creator of Married with Children. And I was like, oh my gosh. And he got up to go talk to somebody he was doing business with there. And he said, don't let him tell you how to dress, and don't let him tell you that they're right, because they never are. And then he kind of left like a ghost. And I never saw him again. But that got me started. So I got a few TV credits. I'm working my way up through the ranks. And I went on an interview for another show. And in that interview for that other show, I was telling stories of me growing up, stories of me and my dad, me and my uncle. And it wasn't a formal pitch, but after the pitch was over, my agent said they wanted to buy the show I pitched. And I said, I hadn't pitched the show. I don't know what you're talking about. And they said, no, the show about your dad. And I was like, those are just stories. And they go, oh, they want to buy that. Go back there and pitch them the show. So I had to come together and figure that out really, really fast. And David Miner had been managing me, but he had never done this yet either. We were very young. And so I called him and I was like, we have to figure this out. So we figured it out together. And we pitched a show back to them. They bought it. And I kept saying that I couldn't tell my dad about it because it was a lot about him and me, and it was a lot about our very, very, very difficult relationship. And so I made this promise to myself. I said, I'll tell him about it if they shoot the pilot. So I turned in the script, and they called and they said, we're going to shoot the pilot. And then I thought, do I really want to tell him about this yet? So I said, I'm going to tell him about it if after they shoot the pilot, they pick up the show to series, because then people will really see it, and I should tell them. And so they did, and I remember sending him the script, And in it, my uncle is the hero and my dad is the villain. And I'm the protagonist as a 14-year-old boy. And he read it and called me. And in very much my dad's style, he said, "Have you shown this to your uncle?" And I was like, "No." And he goes, "He doesn't come off so good in this. I'm pretty great."
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I love it.
You know, they make these work lights now with clips that hold them in place.
Yeah, I was going to get one, but I decided to have you instead.
So, Peter, I have been able to find some of Greetings from Tucson on YouTube, but it came and went. It is a really extraordinary show for lots of reasons, including the fact that it's groundbreaking. It really, carved new paths. Tell me what, like from like personal experience and maybe speculation, why it's not known.
There's some business reasons and I think some creative reasons why it's not out there to consume or be seen. It's so weird. But I'll talk about the business reasons first, and then I'll tell you creatively, what's a shame that people can't see it. Business-wise, it was a production from a company called Big Ticket Television, which was a subsidiary of Paramount. And it was headed up by a guy named Larry Little, who used to be a president of Warner Brothers Television many, many years ago. And his big show that he had was Judge Judy. And he had other scripted shows too, but Judge Judy was the show that was making a lot of money for him. And the WB bought the show. They were the network. And, we did some especially cool things in this show that ended up being, I think, probably some of the reasons why you can't view it. One of the things we did was there was an episode at Christmas, maybe one of my favorite that we ever did, that involved a lot of pathos about the family. And we really wanted to play John Lennon's Beautiful Boy over the last sequence. And I wrote a letter to Yoko Ono and the publishing company asking her for the rights, and she made us send script pages. And this is sort of, just at the dawn of the internet, script pages to her and explain to her what the show is about and how it would work. And she gave us the rights. So we had that song in the show. We also had a pretty important song to me, Rolling Stones song, Salt of the Earth, represented by ABKCO, which is Alan Klein's label, and he and the Stones did not get along. And I worked out a rights deal where on the premiere night we could use that song. And then I worked out a subsidiary deal with Keith Richards' company so that we dropped in a Keith Richards solo song in subsequent reruns. And so we did these kinds of things that I really wanted to do. We hired Los Lobos to do all the music. And they also played a part in the show. I think they were in 2 episodes. And they played like the idiot bunch of guys that live down the road that have a garage band that's going nowhere. And the Joaquin, the dad in the show, would always berate them like, "You guys are 40, you should get a job. This is not going to happen for you." So we did a lot of cool stuff like that. And I think the music rights issues probably are part of it. I also think in the consolidation of all the studios, it's a Paramount-owned thing, but it aired on WB, and it just feels like nobody's got the idea to put it back on. But Lupe Ontiveros was in it, playing my grandma. We had Terry Garr and Martin Mull on it, playing my Irish grandparents. That was a thrill. We had Carmen Electra on it, and Vince Neil in a weird, crazy WB crossover thing. And I had my pal Jeff Garland. I had a lot of people I knew doing parts, and it was I met Jacob Vargas, who I've worked with twice now and will always work with. He's so amazing. And Amy Garcia got her start there. And it just was an incredible time. And then we got 22, we got a full season. And it was a big deal to get a full season.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I remember somebody calling from, to tell you how groundbreaking it was then, somebody called from WB Casting during the run of the show. And they said, you know, we're just calling all of our shows to just remind them to be diverse when they cast, because we have this diversity problem. And I was like, hey, I got 6 series regulars that are Latin and 1 white lady. Like, I think you're asking me if I should put more white people in the show. And she laughed and she goes, no, not you. We're calling everybody else. And so it was really special. You know, we came on right at the same time as George Lopez. And I remember getting a Producer of the Year award that year at the Alma Awards. Mm. And I remember the day that the award ceremony was, that George Lopez had just got his back 9, first season back 9 that day. And I remember there was some competition between the show and, you know, they're on giant ABC and we're on little WB. And to me, it wasn't a competition. And so when I got up to give my thank you speech, the first thing I did was say, you know, I want to give a special acknowledgement to George. And he was at the table and people said he got a little tense, like, is this guy going to go after me or something? And I was like, he got his back 9. And like, when one of us wins, we all win. And that's what we got to keep doing. And so I just remember that time being very special to me. And I wish more people could see that show.
Yeah, me too. The few episodes that are on YouTube are seriously, and I'm not just saying this because, you know, you're a friend and the writing, the act, the whole thing, like, is just mind blowing. And how you can use comedy, a situation comedy, to take us places that are really thoughtful, that are culturally rich and complicated. Yeah, it's amazing. It is.
Thank you. Well, it was special. I still think of some of the lines, and like you're just talking right now, and I just maybe think of a line for the dad, because the son wants to go caddy, get a job as a caddy at a golf course to make extra money to take the girl out that he loves. And the dad had these sayings all the time that were just like, and he would always announce them like, you know what I always say? And that one was, he goes, you know what I always say about golf courses? He's, I don't like that much grass together unless there's gravestones. And it's like that kind of stuff that would come out of his mouth was just incredible and special, you know?
Yeah.
And an interracial couple that we did that. And I think somebody at the time told me, 2002, they said, oh, this is the first interracial regular couple since the Jeffersons. Like, oh, okay. And it was just my family. That was the cool part. It was just my family.
And you have a young Latina who's, independent, smart, who's kind of off to college, all those things. It's
just like in my family, right? She had to go to school. She got to go off to college, but she had to move in with her grandmother because nobody wanted her anymore.
Right. So Peter, you've working hard, writing the whole 9 on this, and now you have this amazing list of things that you've been behind and really been the kind of creative force of. Wizards, One Day at a Time, all of these shows, one way or the other. Why is you've chosen a path, a very difficult path? One that has huge rewards, of course, but were there times when you were just like, I can't do this anymore? I'm just like, it's just too much?
Every day, man. Every day. I think it's the long, lonely race of the marathoner, where if you're thinking, I got to run 26 miles, it's hard to start. But if you think, I'm just going to go around the corner here and then hit that lamppost and then we'll see how I'm doing, that it's much easier to think about. Can I get a show? Can I get a job this year? Can I get a pilot sold this month? Can I get a pilot shot next year? Each of those 4 shows you have up, it's interesting to me that, let's start with Lopez. Now, that's George's show. That's the George Lopez show. That was the show that was on when Tucson was on. So I got to work on a show called George Lopez, or called Lopez, I think. And that was really special. And it wasn't my show. I was the only Latin writer in the room, which is a thing that continues to this day. But he was happy that I was there. And we did a show where he actually, for the first time, because he's had a few shows, he played George Lopez. He played a comic who had been divorced, who his ex-wife had given him a kidney, who lived in Beverly Hills where people kind of didn't want him there, and was trying to go back home, and people there thought he was a big shot. And it was a really naked and vulnerable George Lopez. Mm-hmm. And that was really fun to play in with him. And I did the first season, and then I left that to go do One Day at a Time, which I was able to be a part of the first season of. And again, not my show, but it was really an incredible room to be in and an incredible time. There were more Latin people in that room than on my previous show. And it was nice to be in that balance. It was nice to not have to be the expert. And I feel really proud of the work that I did there. I wrote an episode that was about a Mexican-American friend who was staying the night over and over again at the house until people realized she didn't have anywhere to go. And we found out that her parents had disappeared, and that and it was great. It was great to be a part of that. And then, Wizards always has a special place in my heart, because that was my show.
Yeah. Before we jump into that, Cristela, you did a couple, I know you were like the Latino 101 and others that you wrote. Was there anything with the Cristela show that you can share with us, especially given that, I really liked that show, but then it, got canceled?
Yeah. New shows are hard, and first seasons are hard, and you need support. You need support from the studio, and you need support from the network. And let me tell you what that specifically means. You need them invested in your success. Now, you would say every network is invested in the success of all their shows. But in the network model of releasing, 7 new shows every fall, some of those children are better cared for than others. If you have a show with Kevin Bacon starring it, and you have a show with Cristela, and I don't think they did that year, but just for an example, there's one show that people are going to bet on internally more. And we were always the Maverick underdog show. The way that pilot got shot before I was involved, was they shot the pilot on their own for a limited amount of money. The studio did, because the network passed on the script, and they got a little bit of money from the studio, and they said, let's just shoot it anyway. And then when they did, they gave it back to the network, and the network was like, oh my gosh, this is good. Let's put it on. So it was an incredible story, but you kind of go in knowing you're going to get bus ads, not billboards, and you're going to get promos, not commercials. And it's just hard.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Seeing it from that side of the table, from that perspective. Now, Wizards, what kind of magic, literally, and then like in the story itself is that? That was Wizards, as you said, a special place for you, and really a kind of magic, all these things coming together.
Yeah, Wizards was something that I sort of backed into. I had worked on a show in New York and come home early. Not early, but after the first season of working on the show in New York, I decided I didn't want to go back to New York. And I came back too late to join another show. And so I went and met at Disney Channel, and they had this pilot script, and They needed a rewrite and they needed a showrunner. And so I asked if we could make it a blended family, Shades of Greetings from Tucson. And by the way, they were fans of Greetings from Tucson. I think that's one of the reasons why they wanted to meet me, because they really liked the sibling rivalry in that show, and they liked the realness of those characters. And so we made it a blended family. I remembered a videotape someone gave me of a young Selena Gomez in a single camera pilot that didn't go. And I asked if I could bring her in for this. They had promised her to another show already. And so I kind of bullied / convinced them to let me cast her in Wizards, because I knew they were only going to make one series, 2 pilots, 1 series was their model. And I said, let's let her lead this series and the other one. And that way you'll pick up the series you like best, not the one with the actor you want more. And so they said, okay. So we shot 2 pilots. I shot mine, and Danny Kalis shot his pilot, and she was in both. And then they picked up Wizards. So that journey was incredible. Watching those kids grow up was incredible. Working with David DeLuise, who I'd worked with before on a show called Jessie that starred Christina Applegate, was super cool. David and I used to play softball together. And when we were looking for the dad, I was like, that guy will be great. And again, we had Jeff Garlin in that show. We had my dear departed friend, Fred Willard, who's my son Joaquin's godfather, was in that show. And it was one of those times where we were successful and we got to do what we wanted for the most part. And we made something really special. We won a couple of Emmys, and we made a great movie that I think is still the 2nd highest rated movie Disney Channel's ever done, only behind High School Musical 2. I think we beat High School Musical. So special times.
Well, Wizards is still a main staple of, the Aldama household. That's for sure.
That's right.
So other TV now, I know that we have to put kind of, food on the table and stuff.
Sure.
So there are choices that are made, et cetera. But it
Sure.
seems like you do make very careful choices about where you finally end up putting your energies. Maybe tell us a little bit about some of the other shows that you've been on.
Sure. Well, you've got some pictures up that are really good and worth talking about. But I will say that, I was a low-level writer on a show called Three Sisters. I learned a lot about how to run a show from my bosses, Deanne and Eileen, who later went on to create The Middle. And I love them so much, I forgive them for never hiring me on The Middle. That's how much I love them. But you're right about the careful choices. I can quickly tell you about the 3 you've chosen. That, like, Aim High was a pal of mine from Chicago, Heath Corson, who had written a series, and they were kind of stalled out and couldn't get a green light. I was friendly with one of the executives at the studio, and they asked me if I would do a production rewrite to get the green light. And it had a YA component. I was just coming off Wizards, and so I had a little bit of shine on me for that. So I did that rewrite for them, and then, stepped away once they got the green light, so that when they needed a writer on set, my pal Heath would be available again, and he could go be on set of the show that he created. Because I do feel a loyalty to writers. When you get hired to be rewritten, it never feels good. And so one of the things with that one that I treasure is that I immediately called Heath and said, "Are you cool with this?" With Superior Donuts, a blast to work with Judd.
You don't trust me, do you? Because I'm young? Because I smoke weed? Because I've done graffiti? Because I smoke weed?
You already said that.
Yeah, because I smoke weed. You forgot that.
I know, because I smoke weed.
An incredible blessing to work with Jermaine. The chemistry between the two of them was incredible. To get 2 seasons out of that at CBS is a huge deal. Shame on CBS. Jermaine Fowler, when he was a lead on that show, I think there was an article that was like the first black lead of a sitcom at CBS for 30, 40 years or something like that. It was some crazy statistic. But very happy that we got Diane Guerrero into that show, second season.
Okay, well, thanks for the donut. I'm Sophia, by the way.
I'm Franco.
Okay. Oh, I just moved into the neighborhood, so I'm sure I'll see you around.
I feel like that was one of the things I was most excited to try to do, to bring in this polyglot donut shop that had an Arab and a black, young black man, an older Jewish fellow, a cop, an unemployed boomer. Like, it had all these different points of view, but we were lacking one, right? You went back to that other slide. There's always that we're 18% of the people, but we're 3% of the parts on TV. And we got Diane Guerrero to come in and fill that void in season 2, which was just incredible.
I love hearing all of this stuff. It really enriches, my appreciation, for all that you're doing. You've worked in film too, Peter.
I have. I got to go back one slide though.
Oh yeah.
God bless. I don't know if she'll ever see it, but I can't not mention Amy Carrera, who did Level Up with me, and she is so talented, and they all were, but she's done such a good job. Her show Elena has its last episodes in the next couple of weeks, and she's also She-Ra, which is also coming to an end on Netflix, and she's just incredible. Like, I can't wait to work with her again. But now you can go to the other stuff I've done.
Movies.
Yes. Okay, so the first one was purely a paycheck. Because you said it, right? Sometimes you got to eat. But it was fun. That was a movie that was brought to me by a producer that I had worked for. And they were trying to do something with Walmart where they were making original movies that were going to be sold at Walmart. And then Walmart was going to buy airtime on CBS on the nights of their classic Christmas stuff. And I think they did the first couple of years with it. I think I got checks the first couple of years. But again, because I wrote that, I think Fred Willard was in that. I can't remember if Fred Savage was one of the voices or not, but like people that I knew, I got them to come in and do the work. And so it was fun, but it was definitely a grind. And then Dealing with Idiots was pure fun. I mean, that was Jeff and I deciding we wanted to write a movie that was only an outline. Everything else was improvised. We had a 30 to 40 page outline, and then we cast all of our friends, and he shot it and directed it on a shoestring. And, it's a fun movie that has a short beginning, a very long middle, and almost no ending.
Let me ask you, Peter, you're known, and we know you for your serial writing. For you, is there a difference finally?
Sure.
If you sit down to write for a movie or for a TV show, is there a difference for you?
Huge difference. Yeah. TV is like writing a novel. You hope you're going to be with these characters for a long time. And so you're writing in the present, and you're writing these character pieces that will allow the character to move forward incrementally at a time. So the goal is, over time, they're going to grow, and lots of things are going to happen to them. And with a movie, you're taking a protagonist through one specific story where they're going to be changed forever, and then it's over. And so, a movie is a totally different animal. I've been lucky in the last year and a half. I've written, I think we're up to 4 now. I've had some movie work, and I'm happy about it and excited for it. But it's different. It's a different animal.
If you were to step back from your work and pretend like you were someone else looking at it, how would you characterize it?
Well, why don't you do that? And then I'll tell you how I feel about it. Because I will tell you, you know what? It's something that does interest me a lot. Because like I said earlier, I feel like I'm running the marathon. So I'm just trying to get from point A to B and then map out B to C. But I think I have an idea, but I'd love to hear what your thought is, having done this dive.
Yeah. So my sense of Peter's work, your work, would be to say that you're very tuned into the entertainment aspect, that these stories need to entertain, and at the same time there's a kind of smuggling in, a sort of subterfuge where you're bringing in complexity of emotion, of range of characterization, of issues, all of the things that, you know, enrich our experience with story. So we might think that Wizards on the surface is, for instance, you know, just a popcorn fun show, but then when you actually watch it, you're actually like bringing to us in our brains and our minds and our imaginations ways that really complicate our understanding of where TV can go.
That's tremendous. Thank you. I agree with that. And I have some anecdotal evidence to that fact. And I would also say that to add to that, I would say that I'm more interested in the underdog than I am a successful person. And I would say it's interesting. I read Muy Pop, and I read the book that Eric and you and I will be talking about. Where is it? Say the title.
Yeah, the Real Latinxs.
Real Latinx. So you bring up a concept that's really stuck with me about, isn't the will to style?
Mm-hmm.
And I've been thinking about that because I do have a long resume now. And I think that's what got me to the place of, I'm always about the underdog. When you think about like my comic book that's coming out, that's about a henchman, like I like the idea of looking at things from a different slice, whether that be a slice of class, of race, even of geography, right? Not New York or LA, but let's go to Arizona. And that is part of what gets me going. And I also think that I like stories with emotion, and I'm not afraid of it. And even if you go back to Greetings from Tucson, that doesn't just mean like yelling and apology. It means, like you said, messy, complicated things that we all go through. There are people we love and we hate, and we still have to see them every day. And how does that work? All the way through to Mr. Iglesias, where I'm sure someone would watch that and think that Oscar Nunez is the villain, but I would point to 2 or 3 episodes where he's the one that helped Mr. Iglesias figure out what he needed, and that he gets invited out with them, but it always feels kind of weird and awkward. And I would say that that's the richness that I'm after.
Speaking of which, writing, pitching, and the hustle. So this is really kind of getting at, like, you know, and I've been there, of course, not in the same degree as you, but where, you know, I spend weeks, months doing something where I'm really focused on writing, and it ends up going into a drawer or something. But tell me about this, like this life.
Yeah, you fall in love with stuff. There's a point in the writing process where, and it's not always at the beginning, but there's somewhere along the way where it clicks, and you have this dangerous moment where you are in love with a project. And that's sometimes when the rug gets pulled out and they tell you, we're done. We're not going to do it. It's over. And there's been a couple of those in my career And the one that you've got the slide of is one of them. But I'll talk about that second. And I'll say that I can't not fall in love, because, that's part of being an artist, is saying, like, here I go again, here I go. It's probably never going to be as good as it is in my head. If I get it out on canvas, will it be as good as I thought it would be? But here I go again. I'm going to try one more time. You just have to be willing to take that hurt again. And one of them was this pilot I wrote called Henchman, that I had Horatio Sands from SNL attached to. And it was born out of my love of comic books and my disgust with Marvel and DC's movies, not including any vatos anywhere. And so I was like, somebody's got to be mowing those lawns and loading those trucks, probably Mexicans. Let's write a show about those guys. And so it fell apart. Nobody wanted to do it. And I kind of, like you said, project goes in a drawer. And then about a year ago, I had an opportunity. Somebody approached me and said, why don't we make that a comic book? And so we're about to start our Kickstarter. Starburns is going to be the publisher. And we're going to do Henchman, Rafael Garcia, Henchman, the comic book. So like that project came back to life. Mm-hmm. And I really hope that the Danny Trejo one does too, because that one was really a tough loss. That one was about pain. It was about parenting. It was about, what happens if the monster comes back to your life, and they're not a monster anymore. They've changed, but you don't want them to change. It's too easy. You want them to continue to be the monster, the villain that you cast them as when you were younger. And it was a show about Danny and his adult daughter, Michelle, and not his real life adult daughter. He doesn't have a daughter named Michelle. But it was sort of an amalgamation of things, of my relationship with my father from Greetings, Danny's time in prison, his relationship with his children, my relationship with my children. And it all kind of came together in this really special script that ABC decided they didn't want to make. And I think that gets back to some of those ratios we saw earlier where, 18% of the people and 3% of the characters. And it's hard, but you got to keep going.
Yeah, the gatekeeping. And, I know that you spend a lot of time also mentoring and teaching for future generations to be able to come into this space, that you've worked so hard to clear. And we're going to talk about that in a second, but yeah, there's still that gatekeeping that's happening out there.
I know. And I just went through it, with Julia East Willie B, writer producer. We just pitched something that, we thought was in really good shape with the really good auspices attached. And, we just couldn't get it over the bridge. And, I think sometimes in the gatekeeping world, they don't want complexity. They're very interested still in our immigrant stories. They're very still interested in our, as Julia would say, they're interested in our trauma. They're not interested in who we are. Mm-hmm. And this story we had was about, a very go-getter, professional, 20-something female, real ass kicker. And she wasn't an immigrant, and she wasn't poor, and she wasn't, she was just her. And that was hard. It was a hard loss.
Yeah. Speaking of gatekeeping, just recently we've all been on social media, not surprised, but maybe kind of just finally throwing our arms up, really with the Emmys, because here we are, and we're not being represented.
I know. Now, let me ask you a question. What do you mean by intervention?
Yeah, so intervention. So hashtag #MeSoWhite, and you've made these incredible shows that have led to the opening of possibilities for other shows, and opening the minds of people that normally control the money and control what stories are told and seen and heard. And so in that sense, maybe it's an indirect, I'm going to kind of like do this, or maybe it's my work is doing this work and I'm going to continue to intervene in the world.
I see. Yeah. I think because part of me has always been anti-authority, and part of me has always been more into punk rock than new wave. And so I think the whole thing should be intervened with, and not just on behalf of Latinx, but just on behalf of everyone. Like, I personally don't need to see another show about, a 20-something white guy trying to make it on his own. Like, I'm good with those. I've got those. I want to see something different. And that different doesn't have to be me. That different can be anything.
Mm-hmm.
I'm excited when I see Atlanta. I'm excited when I see Insecure.
Mm.
I'm excited by those things. I'm excited when I see Crazy Rich Asians. And part of it is because I want us to have our versions of all three of those shows. And I don't think we have. I don't think we have yet. And so when I see the Emmy So White situation, I have a very mixed reaction. My first reaction is, screw them. It's kind of how I feel a little bit about network television right now. Like, you know what? If you don't want us, then we're going to stop making you important to us.
Mm.
We're just going to go over here where they'll let us do these things. And that, to me, is, Mr. Iglesias on Netflix, and One Day at a Time on Pop, and Vida on Stars. It's like, you know what? If ABC wants to cancel Baker and Beauty, go for it. If you want to have no Latino shows on all broadcast networks, great. That's your prerogative. I choose to think you're a sinking ship. The ratings are going down, and we will see you, in the water with the rest of us trying for a life raft. Now, on the other hand, it is important, and I feel like it is a signpost and it is a milestone that says we've arrived. And so it is with conflicted feelings that I approach these things. And I think that also is a hallmark, not only of my work, but I kind of feel of being a Mexican American or being a Latinx person in America. Like, we could talk about the mixed feelings about the phrase Latinx. That's within our own community. And I just feel like, it's with mixed feelings that I approach that. But it is a shame that Rita Moreno didn't get nominated.
Yeah, no, I that what you've just said resonates in so many different ways, but even just very personally, like, we, like you said, we need to have like hashtag Black Lives Matter TV. It's like, why? Because our families very often have internalized the kind of racism that's out there. And the more representation that we have coming from the underrepresented spaces, the better for all of us, right?
Right. And I think it goes back to something, I agree with you, and it goes back to something you said about me, about entertaining and smuggling. Because what we're talking about is a political, social thought. But we're not saying, and I'm not saying, you should watch my show and take your medicine, because I know those shows, and those are not my favorite shows. But we should have the space to make those shows that are going to be Mr. Iglesias' monologue about Latinx. That's a page and a half that Gabe and I wrote because of our feelings about that concept, with a whole bunch of jokes in it. And that, to me, is the important move. Let us play and let us breathe inside your world, and we will make it better, I promise. I think also of conflicting feelings right now is, it is hashtag Black Lives Matter. And I guess as long as I'm being vulnerable and open, I can say that is the group that needs support right now. That is the group that is in danger, literally, physically in danger. But when I read that 2 weeks ago, Netflix bought a package, a library of Black comedies, living single, girlfriends. They brought a library of Black sitcoms to put on Netflix as part of their move of Black Lives Matter. And the part that makes me go inside my heart, and you just showed a bunch of pictures of shows I worked on, I don't know that there's a library if they wanted to. If they said, you know what we'd like to do now that we've done that is we'd like to buy a library of Latin sitcoms that we could program. And you're like, well, there are none. I've worked on almost all of them, and they're between 22 and 40 episodes. So, you know what? I mean, Wizards, I think, has the most, maybe. George Lopez got close. Maybe he has more. But those are probably the two shows with the most amount of episodes. And that's not even saying they have a ton of episodes. So it's just miles to go, miles and miles to go. So I guess I bring that up because I feel like we need the shows before we can take down the Emmys. We got to get the shows first.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, really smart, honest response. And in a way, you've kind of answered this question about the significance of awards for Latinx creators. But, you know, they do mean something. They are important, aren't they?
Yeah, they are. They are. They give notoriety, and they give a platform to a broader audience, for sure. In a world where a lot of networks don't know how to market to us, this is an easy 101 thing. You won the Emmy. Here's a promo for your show. I think that's important. I think us celebrating ourselves with things like the Almas is important. I think that when we're asked to be on a panel, it's important. You know, and I'm not trying to make this about takedowns. I'm trying to make this about forward momentum. But like, you know, you and I are comic book geeks. I watched Fandom yesterday. Did you watch any of that? Okay. So DC Fandom was yesterday, and they had a Boss Woman of DC Universe panel, and it had on the new Batwoman. It had on the actress that plays Iris West. It had on the woman that plays the Arab American hero on Legends of Tomorrow, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it didn't have Diane Guerrero from Doom Patrol on. Now, I don't know if Diane was busy and was asked, or if Diane Guerrero wasn't asked. But, you know, I would say this. If there's a panel, we should be on it if we can be. Volunteer your time if you're an actor in a role like that. Diane, I hope they didn't ask you in a strange way, and I think they didn't, because I know you're down. But I also make sure that people get asked, because I do feel like when these things are happening, there's a lot of times that we just fall through the cracks.
Mm-hmm.
Just fall through the cracks.
It's a question of still not being seen. You know,
Yeah.
we are everywhere. We're in Columbus, Ohio. We are the fastest growing parts of the U.S. are the South and the Midwest, and it's the Latino, Latina, Latinx families, and yet we aren't being seen.
That's right. That's right.
So, Peter, you are a professor there at ASU. You teach new generations of writers, screenwriters, developers of series, producers of series. In many ways, you're kind of at the front line. You're kind of doing what you preach by basically saying, look, I am going to help shape and provide the tools and the knowledge to new generations of TV writers, of storytellers in general.
Yeah, I'm very pleased and honored and feel of service to do this. And you're right. It is, putting my money where my mouth is. I'm telling people they need to include us because when they do, we make things better. Don't include us as a favor. Include us because we're awesome and we're going to make your show better. And if you think and say, as I've heard, that there aren't enough Latinx writers, as the Hawaii Five-0 executive producer, showrunner, may his name never be mentioned ever again, said, then, we'll just have to go out there and overwhelm him and those people with numbers to say, oh, yeah, well, now there's hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of us.
So important, especially for scholars in the academy who work on Latinx pop culture, especially for those, because it is a very strong reminder that there's the scholarship, there's the theory, there's the criticism and the critical discourse, but there's also the important kind of practical, get that pen out, get that computer out and learn how to do this stuff. And this is how the system works. And I'm going to kind of help you navigate that system.
Yeah. And I'm excited tonight. It's the night before school starts for me, and you caught me. I'm doing my lectures for tomorrow. I've got my slides together and we jump off again. And I'm, it's my second year here and it feels great. It feels great to be here. It feels great that ASU wants me to be in LA. They want me to be doing what I'm doing. There's no division here of my purpose. I do have people, both other professors and students going, why are you here when I look at what you're doing? And you nailed it though, but I'm here because you've seen in the slideshow today the progression of my goatee. And we got to get somebody in there after me so that can be their headache and not mine.
That's great. You mentioned Hinchman, and what I loved about that is, in a way, yes, sometimes, as heartbreaking as it is, we have to put something in a drawer. But you and I also know that our creativity and our stories and the work that we put into that never goes to waste. And finding this other incredible place for dynamic storytelling, comics.
Yeah. I love it. I also feel really good when I read them. And I feel really good when I think about, it sounds crazy, but the comic business has taken another hit in the last month or two, with the pandemic and with DC Comics imploding. But I think it's a good time to be bringing a fresh story to light, right? And we're going to watch this guy who works for the bad guys. One of my favorite, it's not in the first issue, but it's a subsequent issue. One of my favorite lines in there is when he's trying to convince his girlfriend that he's not bad. And he compares himself. He goes, look, I don't think the writers on The Simpsons think they're bad and they work for Murdoch, and he's evil, but they're not. And so to do a show about somebody who's inside this organization that's seen a certain way, and what are they going to do? What are they're trying to make a living, and they're trying to just deal. And that's exciting to me.
And you've, this is, one of the things about comics that is sort of a shared, it's sharing in the co-creation of a story, which is something that is your forte.
Yes. It is so much more to do with TV than people think. Yeah, it is giving off descriptions to an artist. It is letting someone else letter it and then getting it back and saying like, oh no, I thought this word should be bolded. And these two should be separate balloons. And them saying, oh, no problem, we can fix it. But it's truly that. And it's being surprised when you see the art and saying, I hadn't imagined that, but it's great. Which happens to me all the time with casting, with actors doing lines, doing scenes a certain way, and me being surprised and then delighted by it.
I can only imagine what that must feel like. Where, Peter, is the vitality in TV today?
It is in the nooks and crannies is where it is. And I want to go backwards. Maybe it's probably 10 years now to go backwards, to go forwards. To just say that, like, you know, HBO didn't want Mad Men. They turned it down. One of the main writers of The Sopranos. And he had to go to AMC, which was doing movie reruns, and get them to say, yeah, we'll take a chance on it. Right? And when you think about, there's a service, Paramount Plus, or a streamer service, or a cable channel. I think it's a cable channel, Paramount. And I don't even know what it used to be. It used to be some other cable channel nobody watched. And, you know, it struggled with what are we? Kevin Costner does Yellowstone on that channel. It's the biggest show on cable. And that's a show that, you know, TNT and TBS, they didn't want it. And so I feel like the vitality is in the nooks and crannies. It's finding what you love in a nook and a cranny and then celebrating it. There's so much out there now that you can do that. Like one of my favorite shows that I'm watching now is Better Call Saul with my son. And that's like a victory lap show, right? That's a victory lap of someone who created something that, again, was in a nook and a cranny when it first came out. Breaking Bad wasn't, oh my gosh, here's the guy from X-Files. It was just, here's a show. So I think that's where you got to find it. I would always be suspicious of the biggest billboard and the biggest promo campaign for a new show, because that's usually a sign that it's got a lot of splash, but it may not have a lot, you know, of treasure inside it, my opinion.
Do you think that the streaming platforms have allowed for these nooks and crannies to find their way to audiences?
That is tricky, right? There's a lot of people that have shows on Netflix that no one's ever heard of, right? A lot of them. Mm-hmm. It requires engagement if you're a consumer. You know, it requires you to say, what do I like? What are things I like? Now, there's certain services that have algorithms, right? They say, oh, you know, Frederick Aldama, you enjoyed City of Angels. You might like this. That exists, but you need to really engage with your community, with your friends, and kind of do it old school style. What are people watching? No one expected Stranger Things to be big. Netflix didn't. They for sure didn't. Netflix thought for sure that the Hollywood show by Ryan Murphy was going to be huge. And it wasn't. So there's an example right there. Now, the vitality of Stranger Things was, in my opinion, the love that those creators had for Spielberg and 80s. That was palpable. You could feel it. I feel like if for those fans of Mr. Iglesias, I hope you can feel our love for Gabe and our love for the mission of a guy saving students. Like, we love it.
Nonsense like this won't happen on my watch.
You know what? You're right. It won't. Because your watch has just been canceled. Paula's staying. A boom.
We were just talking yesterday about wishing we were back in the writer's room. We had a friend who was complaining about having to write via Zoom. And Kevin and I both said, like, oh my God, we love our process of writing. Like, we don't care where we have to do it. We just want to get back to it. So I think you just got to find those by making friends and talking about what you like to watch, like you and I do.
Yeah, I love it. You know, at the there might be algorithms, there might be, thousands of ways that you can interface with entertainment, but in the end, it's still about community and grassroots and, talking to each other.
And I think we get extra help too, because we have students.
Yeah.
And we're both listeners. We're both good listeners. And, I'm always asking people, not in a way that's a class assignment or an exercise, but just wanting to keep my ears open, like, oh, here's what I'm watching. What are you watching?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm excited. I get to start teaching this week as well. I'm so excited. Mighty Peter, why storytelling, Latinx storytelling, storytelling in general matters. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. This has been a pleasure, and not just a trip down memory lane. It's been a great way for me to focus and be verbal about what I believe.
Amazing.